Nathan Hale. By September 1776, the American Revolution was going badly for George Washington. British forces had captured New York City, and Washington desperately needed intelligence on their next move. Without it, his army was fighting blind. He asked for volunteers to go behind enemy lines and gather information. Most of his officers refused. Espionage was considered dishonorable work, and the penalty for spies was death by hanging. One man stepped forward. Nathan Hale, a 21-year-old captain from Connecticut, had no training in intelligence work and had never run an operation. He volunteered anyway. Hale disguised himself as a Dutch schoolteacher and slipped across enemy lines into British-controlled Long Island. For several days, he moved through British camps gathering information on troop strengths, artillery positions, and planned movements. The intelligence could have given Washington the advantage he desperately needed, but on September 21, 1776, Hale was captured by British soldiers. According to most accounts, his own cousin, a loyalist who had sided with the British, recognized him and turned him in. When British troops searched him, they found maps and detailed notes on British fortifications. The evidence was damning. The British commander, General William Howe, ordered Hale hanged the next morning without a trial. On September 22, 1776, Hale was led to the gallows in an artillery park. A British officer asked if he had any last words. Hale reportedly said, "I only regret that I have but one life to give for my country." He was hanged in front of British soldiers and loyalist onlookers. He was 21 years old. Nathan Hale became America's first intelligence operative and its first executed spy. Mata Hari. By 1917, Margaretha Zell, also known as Mata Hari, had become the most notorious woman in Europe. A Dutch exotic dancer who performed in Paris before the war, she had transformed herself into an international celebrity through sheer reinvention. She claimed to be a Javanese temple dancer trained in sacred Eastern arts. In reality, she was a bankrupt divorcee from the Netherlands who had created an elaborate persona to escape poverty. She performed for royalty, slept with military officers across Europe, and moved freely between France and Germany during World War I. To the men she charmed, she was entertainment. To French intelligence, she was a liability. They suspected she was passing secrets to the Germans and had been watching her for months. In February 1917, French agents intercepted German communications that appeared to reference a spy codenamed H-21. They believed it was Mata Hari. She was arrested in her hotel room in Paris on February 13, 1917. During the interrogation, she admitted to accepting money from German intelligence, but insisted she had given them nothing useful in return. She claimed she had taken their cash and fed them useless gossip while secretly gathering intelligence for France. The tribunal did not believe her story. On October 15, 1917, Mata Hari was taken to a field outside Paris and placed before a 12-man firing squad. She refused a blindfold. As the soldiers raised their rifles, she blew them a kiss. 12 shots rang out. She was 41 years old. Decades later, historians began questioning whether she had actually been a spy at all. France was losing the war and desperate for a victory of any kind. Executing a famous suspected traitor gave them one. To this day, no conclusive evidence has ever surfaced that Mata Hari passed meaningful intelligence to Germany. Richard Sorge. By 1941, Richard Sorge had built the most successful Soviet spy network in Asia. A German-born communist working undercover as a journalist in Tokyo, he had spent years cultivating relationships with Nazi and Japanese military leaders. Both sides trusted him completely. The Germans saw him as a loyal correspondent. The Japanese saw him as a valuable contact in the Nazi regime. In reality, Sorge was a committed Soviet agent feeding intelligence to Moscow. The information he gathered would shape the outcome of World War II. In June 1941, Sorge warned Stalin that Germany was about to invade the Soviet Union. Stalin ignored the warning. When Germany attacked on June 22nd, Soviet forces were caught completely unprepared and suffered catastrophic losses. 3 months later, Sorge sent another message to Moscow that may have saved the Soviet Union from collapse. He reported that Japan had decided not to attack the USSR from the east. This intelligence allowed Stalin to pull desperately needed troops from Siberia and throw them into the defense of Moscow against the advancing German army. Moscow held. The Eastern Front stabilized. Sorge's intelligence may have prevented the fall of the Soviet Union, but Japanese counterintelligence had been closing in on his network for months. In October 1941, They arrested members of his spy ring one by one. On October 18, 1941, Japanese police raided Sorge's home in Tokyo and arrested him. He was interrogated for months and eventually confessed to working for Soviet intelligence. Stalin refused to negotiate a prisoner exchange. On November 7, 1944, Richard Sorge was hanged at Sugamo Prison in Tokyo. He was 49 years old. The Soviet Union did not acknowledge his existence until 1964, nearly 20 years after his death. Oleg Penkovsky. By 1962, Oleg Penkovsky had become the most valuable intelligence asset the West had ever run inside the Soviet Union. A colonel in the Soviet military who had grown disillusioned with the communist regime, he volunteered to spy for the CIA and British MI6 in 1960. Over the next 2 years, he smuggled out thousands of pages of classified documents on Soviet missile capabilities, military strategy, and nuclear doctrine. His intelligence gave the West an unprecedented look inside Soviet war planning. In October 1962, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, Penkovsky's intelligence helped President Kennedy understand that Soviet missiles in Cuba were not yet fully operational. This information influenced Kennedy's decision to pursue a naval blockade instead of airstrikes. Penkovsky may have prevented a nuclear war, but the KGB had been watching him. In October 1962, just as the Cuban Missile Crisis reached its peak, Soviet counterintelligence arrested Penkovsky in Moscow. They also arrested his British contact, Greville Wynne. Penkovsky was interrogated and tortured for months. In May 1963, he was put on public trial and convicted of treason. The sentence was death. The official Soviet account claims Penkovsky was executed by firing squad on May 16, 1963. But rumors spread through Western intelligence circles that he had been burned alive in a crematorium as a warning to other potential traitors. No photographs of the execution were ever released. To this day, the truth of his death remains unknown. Eli Cohen. By 1964, Eli Cohen had pulled off what Israeli intelligence considered impossible. Born in Egypt and fluent in Arabic, he had spent 3 years working his way into the inner circle of the Syrian government. He used the alias Kamal Amin Thabet and posed as a wealthy businessman who had made his fortune in Argentina. Syrian officials believed he was a loyal supporter returning home to help the country. They trusted him completely. Cohen threw lavish parties at his apartment in Damascus. Syrian military officers, government ministers, and members of the ruling elite attended regularly. He befriended them, listened to their conversations, and gained their trust. Syrian defense officials were so impressed with him that they gave him personal tours of military fortifications along the Golan Heights, the strategic high ground overlooking Israel. Cohen photographed everything, including troop positions, bunker locations, artillery placements, and weak points in the defenses. He transmitted it all back to Israeli intelligence using a hidden radio in his apartment. Syrian counterintelligence eventually grew suspicious of unauthorized radio transmissions coming from Damascus. In January 1965, they used Soviet-made detection equipment to track the signal to Cohen's apartment. On January 24, 1965, Syrian agents burst through his door and caught him in the middle of a transmission to Tel Aviv. He was arrested on the spot. Cohen was tortured and forced to confess on Syrian state television. His trial was made public to humiliate Israel. He was convicted of espionage and sentenced to death. Israeli officials pleaded for his release. World leaders, including the Pope, intervened on his behalf. Syria refused every appeal. On May 18, 1965, Eli Cohen was hanged in Marjah Square in central Damascus. The execution was broadcast live on Syrian television. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe for more.